When it comes to performance cars, there's one badge that most people don't know what it is. Yes, my friends, I'm driving this 2024 Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrifoglio, and it is the last year here in North America that customers can order a Giulia or Stelvio Quadrifoglio. After that, this car will no longer exist here. So we're going to be spending a little bit of time with an old friend, taking it on the road, and I'm going to tell you why this car just doesn't make sense on paper, but it doesn't need to, because it creates an emotional connection, and that's what's important. So join me as we go in the 2024 Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrifoglio and rip it around. So I last drove the Alfa Romeo Stelvio in 2019, and since then there has been a facelift. The exterior has gotten an update. The headlights are now a 3+3 configuration, pretty much exactly as we saw with the Alfa Romeo Tonale that Victor and I did a couple months ago. And then the taillights have also been updated. They're much more clear than they were before. There was a lot more red in the pre-facelift version. These are a lot more clear. I think it looks quite elegant, a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more luxurious, as well as the interior getting a bit of an update. We now have a 12.3-inch digital gauge cluster that replaced the more analog setup that was on this car before. It works. There's a couple different view modes. So if I put it into dynamic, which is how I've driven this car all week, it gives me kind of a cool little setup, but I could cycle through. I've got a classic look, which kind of throws back to older Alfa Romeos of the 70s and 60s, things like that. And then we've also got what I keep the vehicle in, which is kind of like a mix between having a little bit of information and quite a bit. So I do like this current setup, but you got a couple little modes there. But aside from that, the car is pretty much the same. The things that we don't get, the only option you couldn't order now for 24 were the carbon ceramic brakes. That's what we had in 2019. And yeah, I mean, it's been 5 years since I drove that car, but I can tell you that even though these Brembos are performance oriented, the stopping power is there. I never had any concern about it, but yeah, I mean, if you are really pushing this car, the carbon ceramics would be the way to go. And then you can still get the $4,000 Sparco race seats that deletes the heated seat and actually heated steering wheel, weirdly enough, but it deletes those features. You get the Sparco racing seats. We've tested them before. If you want to know more about it, check that out. But yeah, I think that this build is pretty good, and really the price hasn't changed too much. We figure the one that we did before with delivery would have been about $118,000. This one's $111,000. So you know, you add on the carbon ceramic and the Sparco, actually this is like cheaper than it was before. Fuel efficiency, for those who care, 9.7 liters per 100 kilometers. But you're not buying this car because you care about that. You're buying it for this. Oh my God. I mean, it's effortless performance. And it sounds fantastic. This is pretty much the only car I've ever gotten in trouble with. Not from the law, but from just, you know, random people, NPCs, who didn't enjoy the fact that I'm driving an expensive, loud car. Oh, just like the downshifts. Ooh. And then... Oh God, that sounds so good. I love it. I really do like the soundtrack that this 2.9 liter V6 engine produces. It's a 90-degree V, 505 horsepower, 443 pound-feet of torque. We're using an 8-speed automatic transmission and all-wheel drive. You can't ask for much more than this. And that's what I'm saying, folks. You know, if you compare this to a BMW X3M competition or a Mercedes GLC 63, there's no comparison. I mean, those cars, they're refined. They have a much more luxury experience. You know, when you drive the car in their sport mode, it's going to automatically disable the auto stop start. This doesn't. Like, you know, the infotainment on this is laughable. But you're not buying this car for any of that. You're buying it for that emotional connection that you get when you drive this vehicle. You want something exotic. You want something different, you know, because there are tons of X3s and GLCs on the road, but there are very few Alfa Romeos, and there are even fewer Quadrifoglios. So if you really do want something that stands out, you go with this. Now, in the time that we've driven all of these types of vehicles, I did drive the Jaguar F-Pace SVR. That has that 5-liter supercharged V8 engine. Now, when we talked about that vehicle, it was not very long ago, like 2 months ago, I completely forgot the Stelvio existed because I really only talked about how that vehicle compared with the Germans. But I have to say that if you're looking for an exotic car, the Jaguar is the next most logical choice when it comes to something that isn't run-of-the-mill. So, you know, that's really where the comparison is. Forget about BMW, forget about Mercedes-Benz. It really goes between this and the Jaguar. Now, how would I compare these two vehicles? I'd say the Jaguar had a nice interior. It was a little bit more modern, a little bit more refined, I'd say, and the experience was fantastic. I mean, you can't argue. If you haven't seen that video, go take a look at it. It is linked up in the top right corner of your screen right now, and that just was a fun vehicle. I loved it. And now when I'm driving this, it makes me wonder, like, would I go with the Jag or would I go with this? Both of them here, at least in Canada, are considered to be something exotic because you don't see a lot of them on the road. But which one would you go with? Like, for me, I do like the look of this. I really think, especially with the facelift, this vehicle has gotten better. I wouldn't get it in this color. The Verde Montreal color is the one to get. And if you happen to see any footage of that, especially with Ontario plates on it, that is because our friends over in Montreal have the chance to drive that configuration. We don't, and that's fine because every other Stelvio we've driven, even the Giulia that James did, it's always been in red, and that's kind of the color you get if you want an Alfa Romeo. But I would go with the green, and I would pretty much do the same configuration as this. I like the black rim upgrade that we got on this. The rims are fantastic, 21-inch. You do feel a lot of the road, especially with the suspension in dynamic mode. I mean, you feel absolutely everything, but that's part of the package. It's what you're getting with this experience. So yes, it doesn't make sense. And that's the whole point of it. That's why this is such a weird vehicle to review, because, you know, you're only going to be buying this because it doesn't make sense. And that's awesome. I mean, if you go out and buy this car, you're cool in my books. I mean, oh, buddy, it drives really differently. I mean, I can't say it drives great. You know, the ride is so rough, but it's so different from everything else on the market that it really gives you just, you know, a very unique experience. You know, that's why I wanted to feature this vehicle. I got the email from Stellantis North America to say that this was the final time you could order this vehicle. 2024 is it. And I jumped on it right away. I think I am really the first person here in the Toronto press fleet to get my hands on this vehicle, because, you know, think about controversial people who've passed away. When they were alive, yeah, everybody had an opinion about them. Maybe it was good, most of it was bad. But as soon as they died, everybody just had good things to say. It's like we forgot about how terrible of a person they were. And I feel it's the same thing for me when it comes to this vehicle, because it isn't the one that I would necessarily pick. And now that I can't buy it after this year, all I can think about is how great it was. And that's really what a car should be. We've talked about it when it came to a vehicle like the Kia Stinger. It needed to die. And unfortunately, I think that this and the Giulia Quadrifoglio in this market need to move on to. We need to have a reason to have bought these vehicles. And if they just kept making them, they really wouldn't be special anymore. So if you have the chance to get one of these, if you're in the market for about $111,000 Canadian, and you want something that isn't just run-of-the-mill, you want something with a lot of personality, this is the one to go for. It's not for the faint of heart, but if you do like something that truly stands out, I can't think of anything else. And really, even when you compare it to the Jag F-Pace, you know, F-Pace is unique in the sense that it's got a V8, it's got a supercharged V8. Hold on. But it doesn't quite stand out as much. It blends in a little bit, and that's what I found about that car. Unless you knew what the SVR meant, you had no idea. But this, even if you didn't know that that four-leaf clover meant that this is the performance version, it is still a unique looking vehicle that people are going to notice you. And maybe that's not your thing, so this isn't your car. But if you do like to stand out, if you do like something that is just always going to put a smile on your face, you know, over the last week, Stelvio and I have had a really fun time. It's drained my bank account. I spent a lot of money on gas, but it has been a fantastic week spending with this vehicle, because I know it's going to be the last time that I'll drive a car like this. It's a little bittersweet when you think about it. Goodbye, Stelvio. I've enjoyed our time together.